Alright, now we're at a pretty important part of the project. We've built a frame jig, so what we did yesterday was we've got the motor jigged on this base plate, which is actually a base plate out of a CNC machine, so we know it's pretty true. So we had the motor here with the current model frame bolted over it. So we worked out where the headstock needed to go. And this is the start of the jig that we'll use for when we weld it. It'll have bars and everything holding it all in place so nothing moves when the aluminium's welded. But what we've had to do, and we discussed with the engineer before doing all this, was removing this part of the frame, which is where the engine mount is, and then building a new part and welding that back in. So because of the 98 engine bolts back here, obviously it was never going to work because the mount is up here on the late model one. So we're going to replace this part here and basically make a new one, and also up under the back here, the 4 mounting tabs that mount the back of the engine don't line up, so we're going to have to replace them too. So it's not a biggie. The main thing is that we've got the engine sitting in there nicely now. The airbox, the bottom half of the airbox fits in beautifully. There's room around both sides, which I'm really happy about. And the main issue is, even though the tank design from the early to the late one is quite similar with this big open section under here, the front of it, and maybe it's because of the way it's sitting, this can still move a little bit, is fouling just with the tank at the front there. It's looking like we're going to have to cut the bottom side of the tank out and pull that out, modify it, and then weld it all back in. And yeah, pretty excited because we've now got the current model engine sitting in the early frame, and it's the start of what will hopefully be the biggest part of the project. And from there on in, it's just basically getting all the rest of the components to fit and then pulling it apart, making it look pretty and putting it back together.
One of the parts we didn't film was the cutting out of the underside of the fuel tank. After a long day of deliberating, I made the executive decision to remove the front section of the tank in order to create more room for the airbox. To strengthen the tank edge, a steel rod was shaped and welded into place. Because of the shape of the tank, the overall capacity wouldn't be reduced much, but the additional room made life much easier. As you can see by the marked sections, areas that were dented previously and fixed with filler could now be fixed properly.
Today I'm working on the fuel tank. Now I've cut this out. This is where the original sender and fuel pickup were for the carbies. Now I've cut this out from here because we've machined this up, which is basically replicates what's on the factory tank on the new R1. So what it is the EFI fuel pump sits in there, so the O-ring on the pump seats on that, and it's basically got this nice little plate that holds it all in place. Now what I've done is cut a hole in the bottom of the tank for that to sit into, and then all we've got to do now is work out the exact angle that it needs to sit on so that we can weld it all in place, and it'll get welded all the way around. But what I'm doing now is on the later model one, it sits about there, but because the 2 overflow drains here on this side, that works. But what I'm going to have to do is bring it around here. So what I'm just check now is by taping this in place, sitting it on the bike, and then making sure that where the fuel line goes, it's all going to work. Otherwise we'll have to modify the fuel line, which isn't a biggie, but it's something that if we can avoid doing it, then it's a bonus. So yeah, get this happening.
And on goes the tape. The reason for doing this is it allows for quick and easy orientation adjustments to be made. In the case of the setup on this R1, no changes were needed and everything fitted into place nicely. After this, Cam from Solid Engineering set to work welding it in.
Alright, boxer Cam. I have one tank sitting where it should. The rubber bump stops aren't at the back, so it's sitting a bit over to one side, but I'll be fine when the bump stops are in and there's a new front mount made. But basically we have tank over airbox, which is the desired result.
Also, in this crazy wide view, ta-da! Yesterday I finished up modifying the new front bracket to mount the new speedo in the old fairing. It's quite neat. It's just a bit of masking tape around there to protect the speedo. But yeah, very happy with that.
My next job was then to construct the front wall of the tank and tack it in ready to be welded by Cam, and then tank sealed. With the tank done, it was back to finalising the rear suspension linkage and alignment. Nuts were used as temporary spacers before new CNC offset dog bones were made. Because we needed to see the full travel of the swing arm, adjustments needed to be made to the table. The next step was to start working on engine mounting. Whilst Johnny made new expanding spacers that would bolt to links on the back of the engine, I set to work making crush tubes and a jig that would allow for full replacement of the old pillion pegs with the ones from the new R1.